Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host Brian Keane, online fitness coach, nutritionist and 3-time best-selling author, here to help you by deconstructing expert guests on all things health, fitness and mindset. Today's guest is with Oisin Mulligainz. Some of you will be familiar with Oisin from social media. He has exploded over the past 6 months to 2 years with over 500,000 followers on both Instagram and TikTok. His channels share simple and practical tips for fat loss and healthy living. But also in today's podcast, we talk about his own personal story of going from 130 kilos to a lean, healthy and happy weight, and some of the behaviors and negative behaviors that he had to avoid, and such as some of the people he was being around and managing his own mental health to sustain his weight loss journey, and the same thing that he does with clients and people he works with now. You also might have seen him from a feature in mainstream media for his viral content on eating McDonalds every day and still losing weight. And this wasn't to promote fast food or anything like that, but to highlight the role that a calorie deficit plays when pure weight loss is the goal, outside of health, outside of energy levels, but just pure weight loss. So in today's podcast, we talk about everything from mental health, losing weight, how to stop caring what people think about you, and it's a very enjoyable conversation with a very self-aware individual who is like a sponge. When we were talking before we went on air, I'm like, okay, Oisin's going to do great things, so stay tuned for him over the next couple of years for sure. Last thing I'll say here is he does speak quite quickly, so if you are someone who is listening in America, Canada, and you're not native Irish, or you're in the UK or anywhere else in the world, he does speak a little bit faster than me or most others from the podcast in the past. So just to set that expectation on the front end, just in case you're struggling to comprehend what he's saying. So without further ado, here is today's great podcast episode with Oisin Mulligainz on his extreme weight loss journey, building confidence after being fat shamed, and how to stop caring what people think about you. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm delighted to be joined today with my guest, Oisin Mulligainz. We are doing this live from Shambally House at the Elevate event. There's people in the room, so you might hear a little bit of background noise. That's totally fine for those of you listening. Oisin, welcome to the podcast.
What is the story, Brian? Nice to be on it with you.
Mate, this is such a weird environment and setup because I nearly always do the podcast virtual through Riverside or through Zoom, but we have an audience here and we're going to talk through your story. We were chatting a little bit yesterday and just before we went on air about your backstory. The last 6 months for you have been crazy in terms of exploding on social media, Instagram in particular, putting out great content, serving people in a very meaningful way. I caught a little bit of your chat yesterday as well. But for everyone who's listening who's not familiar with you, talk to us a little bit about your backstory, just where you're from, what got you into the fitness industry first.
Yeah, these questions are always the hardest one. So I suppose where I kind of started from and where I've come from with regards to my fitness and my page is I used to weigh about 130 kilos back in school. I was consistently bullied for it all the time. I never ever did any sports because I was bullied and fat shamed for it. I never felt good enough to go to the gym or partake in PE because I was like, I'm going to always pick last, or I never felt good enough to do it essentially. And there was one point where my brother came into my room and he just came in and supported me. He was like, look, do you want to come to the gym with me and my friends? And I don't know of any experience, but your older brother is so cool when you're younger. You're like, him and his friends, I get to go to the gym with them. So I was like, yes, I'll go. And he supported me, which was completely different to what I faced before, which was like the fat shaming side of things and people calling me lazy. So when I experienced that support, I really got into it. And my brother was really proud of me and celebrated all my wins. And it got me to a position then where I was like, do you know, I actually want to help other people with the same thing because not everybody has an older brother like my one. And so then I started my fitness page. I actually was meant to do architecture in college, which is mad. In the last year of school, I switched and my guidance counselor was like, no, you shouldn't do that. Why are you switching? There's no money in sports. I was like, I really, really want to help people. And I started college and I got to, I suppose, the position where I was just making videos every single year or every single day for, I think it was like 2 or 3 years with my fitness page. And obviously, most recently, 6 months ago, my account went from 2,000 followers to 500,000. And everyone's like, oh, that's a lucky moment. But they don't see the 2-3 years behind where I was posting the videos. So there was a lot of hard work that went in behind it, but there was always moments where I felt like giving up or I felt like I was never going to reach at this point. The name of my talk yesterday was I'm not supposed to be here. And it's one of these things where, first of all, I was really overweight, never did sport or anything. So what am I doing speaking at a fitness event or even sat on a couch here with Brian Keane? Like that, this isn't supposed to happen. Like what the hell is going on? And so then leading into that then, last year I went through kind of a really bad mental health streak where I came back home from Spain. I just broken up with my ex-girlfriend and I came back home and all my friends had moved to Australia or moved to a different place and I felt like I had nobody other than my mum, who's here as well in the audience as well. So she was always there supporting me and pushing me on, but I got to a really dark place where I actually didn't think I was going to make it to tomorrow. I remember one specific moment I sat on the kitchen table crying and I didn't know what to do. And I was like, fuck, I don't know what to do. And I was telling my mum, just book me a therapy session, don't tell me when it is, and bring me there, because she'd always talk about she is a therapist. And so through that, I kind of she actually brought me to a therapy session. We had a chat, and I started to feel a little better. I started pushing myself out of comfort zone with certain things. And I think without the support of my mum there, and without that side of things, I wouldn't have made it to where I am today. Like I had a podcast myself that I did an episode with my mum. She specifically said I was really worried. I didn't know if you were ever going to make it out of bed, because I was lying down and I was crying. And so to see how things changed to where I am now, it's like, I just want to instill in people, like, you don't know what's around the corner. Like, fuck me if you told me last year, sorry for the bad language.
It's fine, on this podcast you're fine. Yeah.
If you told me last year I'd be sat on a couch here speaking at a fitness event with 500,000 followers, I told you, not a bloody chance, not a hope. So that's what I want to kind of get people. I want to give people the kick to get started at something they're really afraid of, because social media was really scary for me at the beginning, because I wasn't the most confident person. And then also give them the kick to keep going, because you don't know what's around the corner. And I think with weight loss coaching or with online coaching or with stuff like this, people who aren't confident in their message have a really good message, but they're just so afraid. Like, so for online fitness coaches, I actually think there's not enough coaches out there who have been overweight and experienced these things before, because they're too afraid to put themselves out there online, or too afraid to believe in their message. And so I started to switch it, and I was like, feck all this shit, I'm just going to believe in myself. I'm going to start putting my message out there. I don't care if people disagree with my message or don't agree with it or really don't like me, because no matter what I do, people are going to judge me. So if I'm sat at home doing nothing, people are going to judge me for doing nothing. If I'm putting videos online, people are going to judge me for putting videos online. If I go to the gym and I'm overweight, people are going to judge me for going to the gym and being overweight. If I don't go to the gym, people are going to judge me for not going to the gym, you know. So it doesn't make sense. And so I was letting all these stories in my head take over. And so that's my main message here, is to, one, have a different angle on weight loss coming from someone who is severely overweight and fat shamed for it, and try bring in that more empathetic side of coaching, and the mental health aspect of like how important that is and interconnected with weight loss. Because I wasn't overweight because I was just eating like shit. I was eating a calorie surplus. Obviously those played a role, but there was backstory to that whole thing as well. There was mental health involved, of like my mum and dad had divorced, I'd gone through a lot of stuff, and obviously with the fat shame, and it made me just turn to food to cope with things. And one key thing my mum actually told me years ago was like, people use different things to cope. So for some people it's alcohol, for some people it's drugs, and for me it was just food. And I know which one I'd choose out of three of those, which is to me more healthy. And some people use exercise as well, and exercise can be unhealthy in manner if you're doing too much. Yeah.
Hands up for anyone listening to the podcast. Yeah. My hand is straight up on that one.
So that's kind of where I'm coming at it from. The long-winded story of Mulligainz Fitness.
Yeah. Well, firstly, I want to say a massive thank you to your mum, and a shout out to the mums of the world. Wow. And it resonates with me. My mum's always been my biggest fan, and I had those mental health struggles in the teenage years. I was bullied really badly as well.
Yeah.
And I remember the only reason I didn't kill myself was I thought, what would my mum do?
Yeah.
And that, holding on to that, is something that you look back on and you think, wow, I'm so grateful that I'm here now. And I think the power, and I just, as you were saying it, I was cheering up because I was thinking of my mum, and it was exactly the same. And it's your network, and having those people in your life is so important. And now your mess nearly becomes your message, because I think the reason, from observing from the outside, why your content connects so much is, one, you're super authentic. You're very open about your story, your mental health, your issues, your weight, where you came from. And that allows you to empathize with people who are struggling. Because a lot of people, from my experience, and I've been nearly 11, 12 years coaching people now, who have that underlying issue that we're overweight, particularly anyone in that obese category, they have those unsupportive coping mechanisms, normally in the form of food. As I said, I laughed when you said exercise, because that's what I did.
Yeah.
I overtrained. If I was lonely, I worked out. If I was sad, I worked out. If I was angry, I worked out. And I would just train and train and train and train until my body broke down. And we all have these different coping mechanisms that we use. I'm curious with the fat shaming. You've experienced this. You're now in great shape. You're on that journey of documenting where you were to where you are now, showing people what they need to do. From someone that was there in that overweight mindset, you turned to food. What was the thing that stopped you turning to fitness? Obviously your brother brought you in, but I'm very curious, because for those who have those kind of self-limiting beliefs or gaps where they can't get there and they can't make that first step, and this is pulling from your speech yesterday about that first step and doing something small to build onto something bigger. Why did it take you longer to potentially use your brother to pull you into the gym?
Yeah, I think first of all, because I never really had a high confidence in myself. I feel like if you have high confidence, it's easy to walk into a room of people, because going into the gym is kind of a really vulnerable thing. Like, you're going in there because you want to work on yourself, you want to improve. And I actually think one thing that really helped me actually with exercise recently is reframing it. I'm not exercising to change the way my body looks, because for years I would have done bodybuilding training, I would have done weightlifting to the extent of like, I wanted to change how my body looked. I wanted a bigger chest, or I wanted bigger arms for women goals, or whatever it was I had, like just for stuff that actually doesn't really matter. And so when I switched that to actually around the time where I was really struggling with my mental health, to get outside and move around to feel better. Like, for example, there you said you were training because you felt lonely. Some people actually don't realise that training can help with these sort of things. And it's just that when I started to switch it, I was going outside and walking, but I wasn't looking at my step count. I was like, I'm going out to walk to feel better. And I felt better, because exercising for the sake of being overweight is a very negative thing. Like, I'm just going in here because I'm fat. Like, nobody's going to want to do that for a long period of time. If you're going to the gym because I'm fat, or because I'm overweight, because I don't like the way I look, you're going to really hate the style of training. You're probably going to partake in forms of exercise you don't really like. And it's actually only recent I've even got into jiu-jitsu, and it's like now I'm doing my strength training, my lifting weights to improve at jiu-jitsu. But you're talking about the first step. I think making it as simple as possible, because some people think that the step isn't big enough, or I'm not doing enough is a big massive thing. I used to always tell myself that. So for example, I'd go and partake in a PE class and I like wouldn't score a goal, or I wouldn't do well and I'd be last picked. But even going and stepping up and taking part in that class is a step. So what I'd say to some of the clients that I'd work with is like, the first step might even be ringing the gym and asking them what hours they open up at. Because some people are so anxious, and that's a win for some people to actually be able to ring in and be like, what time does the gym open up at? What time is the classes? Can someone come in and work out with me? And I always say this to people as well. If you ring up a gym, they're like, oh, I want to go, but I'm a little bit nervous. They'll give you a free PT session essentially. So you get away with it for nothing. So you're like, oh, just ring up.
That's a great hack there, yeah.
So I suggest that, because that's an easy first step, is just ringing up. Or if you're too anxious to call, even messaging. And although that might not seem like a health and fitness step, it is. You're getting into it slowly. Or like even having someone like that you can have to support you, that like my brother did to drag me along, made a massive difference. So your friends maybe go out on a walk together and suggest things like that, rather than your usual going out for a drink or different things, partaking those activities. And I think making that first step with someone else is easy, but make the first step as small as possible, because sometimes people think they're not doing enough. For example, there are people are really busy, and you've probably experienced coaching them as well, where they're like, oh, I don't have enough time in the day. It's like, that's because they expect that they need an hour to work out, or they need an hour of this. You can go for a walk for 5 minutes. You can fit in 5 minutes whenever. It's not like you have to have high expectations of an hour. And I often come across this with clients where they'll be like, oh, I just don't have time to work out today. It's like, okay, tomorrow what we're going to do is after your break, you're going to go for a 5 minute walk. And then they're like, oh yeah, I can do that, but I don't think that's exercise. It's movement. And actually there's scientific research coming into snacking exercise, I think it's called, where you break down your exercise into small little bits throughout the day, and it still gives you massive health benefits as well. And so bringing that, making it really simple, and also the first step for everyone is different. And so I really like jiu-jitsu. You really like your weight training, different aspects, or your HIIT training or whatever. And like, I can do my jiu-jitsu and be healthy. You can do your weight training and be healthy. We all have different things that we can do. We don't have to just weight train, or we don't have to just do burpees, or we don't have to just do something. So breaking it down and making it simple for people. I think even coaching for people is massive. Like if you don't have an older brother, search for one. Find one.
Find your version of an older brother. But it's an accountability partner, effectively.
Yes.
Or I'm curious on that, because something I've been telling people to do more recently is finding inspirational figures. Because social media is a little bit of a funny one, and you probably gathered this for the last 6 months. Depending on where your headspace is at, you can see a fitness account and feel super inspired by that account, or feel really bad about yourself if you're having a low day, your energy's not too good. Yeah. And that same account might make you feel brilliant on one day and terrible on another day. So there's a bit of a catch-22 there. But I think finding inspiration, particularly if you're feeling stuck, like one of the things Mel Robbins says, I've heard it on different podcasts, and she was supposed to be on this one as well, and I've quoted it back, is when you're feeling stuck, you need to put yourself, it's feedback. If you're hungry, you have a signal in your body that is saying, you need food. If you're thirsty, you have a signal in your body saying you need water or you need a drink. If you're feeling stuck, it's a signal that you're not growing anymore and you need to move. Yes. We were talking about yesterday about being around the right people and, making sure you're constantly growing, etc. And I think when it comes to a fitness journey, finding someone who inspires you, Rebecca O'Rourke's at the back of the room here. A lot of people follow her content. Like, she's someone whose workouts I follow because she crushes it. Jamie the same. And that can be really helpful towards, if you don't have an older brother, if you don't have someone that works as your accountability.
Yes.
I want to put it back onto the mental health side of things, just because this is something I massively struggled with. And thankfully, I'm 35 now, about 10 years ahead of you on my journey. But it's something I struggled with for nearly all of my 20s. I started to get a bit of a hold of it in my 30s, got a bit better when my daughter was born in 2015, because you pulls you out of your bubble a little bit.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my first step towards healing a lot of anxiety, environmental depression. Most of mine was through making bad decisions, being around toxic people, emotional vampires, people who sucked my energy. And when I removed myself, a lot of that went away. How's your mental health now? It's something you struggled with, but is it something that you still have to stay on top of? I always use things like anxiety, like sweeping the floor.
Yeah.
You can sweep the floor today, but if you don't do it tomorrow, the floor gets dirty again.
Yes.
You need to do things every day to stay on top of it. How is yours currently?
I think people normalise working on your physical health so much, but they don't normalise working on your mental health all the time. I set myself non-negotiable since last September that every single week I'm going to go to therapy. And obviously therapy is expensive for some people. And again, I spend an absolute fortune on it. And I just make sure that that's one thing every single week I'm going to put money aside to. So as much as possible, I still go and I still have a chat. And I think therapy is like something that is seen as you have to have something wrong with you to go. It's like I go when I'm happy. I go when I have the crack. I have the crack with the guy in there and I just speak to him. It's just normal, like a just conversation. My biggest fear before I went is like what I'm going to speak to this guy about. It's so funny because I'm paying him like 70 euro every time to speak to me. So if he doesn't speak, he's not doing his job. So it's so funny. That was my biggest fear the first time. But I always make sure that I go to therapy as much as possible. I speak to people. Luckily, I have my mum that I'm so open with, and that's why I dragged her along here today. Well, she wanted to come. She's like, I'm not coming. But just having that support there to always be open and speak, I think that's like, it doesn't even have to be therapy. You can go to, you can be speaking to anyone. Find what makes you feel good and do that. And that's kind of what I've really set myself is every week I'm going to try and do something that makes me feel really good and challenge myself as well. Because it's very easy for me not to feel great if I'm not challenging myself. For example, the talk yesterday was that. Now I'll go home and I'll feel great for the next couple of weeks. I'm like, I did that talk. That was so nerve-wracking. Or my jiu-jitsu competitions that I do as well. It's like some guy was literally trying to kill me there 10 minutes ago. Now how can anything else impact me? How can anything else in life be quite difficult? So I suppose challenging myself in different ways. Working on my mental health by like doing a bit of research on things and like questioning things. And I think therapy helps with that. But the non-negotiables of going to therapy and pushing myself out of my comfort zone really, really helps. Last little while about my mental health. Again, I think it's quite normal to have times where you feel really great and times where you don't feel too good. And like things that help me when I'm not feeling too good is like write out all my wins on a piece of paper. So every little small thing, like I got up last week and went for a shower. It might sound stupid to some people, sometimes it's difficult for people. I got up and went for a walk. Or a win for me is like the talk or meeting you, for example, like loads of these little things. I'll write them all down and then I'm like, okay, right, we're making forward momentum. I'm feeling a little bit more positive. And touching back on that Instagram feed where sometimes you see something that's really negative and sometimes you see something that's really positive, and it might be the same content, you just see it on different days. A lot of clients would experience that as well, of like at the start of their weight loss journey they're doing nothing, or at the start of their health journey they're doing not really a huge amount. And when they start, it's like, okay, I'm doing a 5-minute walk, and then after a little while of working with you, if they only get a 5-minute walk in, they're not happy about it, they're really negative about it, like I'm not gonna, and then you refer it back, you're like, remember 6 months ago you were like not doing anything and look at where you are now. So when you reframe it and get back to the positive side, which is what writing down my wins helps with, it makes things a lot easier. But as I said, I still have highs and I still have lows. It's quite normal for everyone. I think normalizing that as well makes it easier, because when I was really struggling last year, I felt like I was the only person that was feeling like this and I was never going to come out of it. And like I was fully convinced I was stuck there. And I always speak to Mum about that. I was like, I never thought I was going to feel better. And one thing she said to me was like, you'll be fine. And after she said that, I was like, holy shit. I was like, this just changed. And it's just a simple sentence, but it just clicked in my head. And I was like, Jesus Christ, I'm being silly here. And my dad's advice to me was like, you're a gobshite. And I took that the same way, because that actually worked for me too. So having my mum and my dad both speak to me in different ways, I took those sentences, I was like, yeah, I am a little bit of a gobshite sometimes. And it's normal to feel not okay. And it's like, you'll be fine. And I think that aspect of like everybody goes through these downs and these ups and these downs, and that over time it will get easier and you'll get better at coping with these things that are hard. Like that talk was really difficult for me yesterday. Sitting down on this couch in front of everyone here is really difficult for me, but the next time I do it, it's easier. Yeah. And then that's kind of like how life goes. The next low I have won't be as bad because I've experienced something lower the last time. Like not going out with my ex-girlfriend anymore was massive for me. So I'm only 25 years old. I haven't experienced a huge amount yet. So the next time something like that happens, hopefully it doesn't, that I'll be a little bit better at dealing with it. And so when I see it like that and more of a positive, it helps massively.
Yeah, it's the high end of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, because you end up learning from those feedbacks. It's funny that your mum had that and your dad had that. I remember when I was working full-time as a teacher, actually around your age of 25, that was my job. I was a primary school teacher and I hated my first job, hated it. Had a real pity party for myself when I came home at Christmas, and my mum was like, you know, you're not a fucking tree. If you don't like who you are, you can move. And I was like, oh, I never really thought about it like that. I was like, that's a really good point. I was like, I'm not a tree. So every time I feel stuck, I'm like, I'm not a fucking tree. I can move. Like, and those things, like you're a gobshite, just knock you out of that. And I think it's really important to know that if you're feeling stuck in a job or in a relationship or on your weight loss or fitness journey, there's people out there who can help you. There's people out there who can motivate you and inspire you, like what you're doing online. And with that mental health, I'm very curious, because one of the things I always try and reframe with clients, particularly those who are so focused on weight loss, is it's what I call the I'll be happy when fallacy. That I'll be happy when I lose 50 pounds. I'll be happy when I lose 100 pounds. Yeah. And I always tell them, look, I can help you get there, but if you lose 50 pounds, all I can guarantee is you'll step on a scale and there'll be the 50 pound lower number. Yeah. I can't say it's going to make you happier. It'll probably make you healthier if we do it right, but you still have to work on a lot of that body confidence, that confidence in yourself. Did you find when you lost the weight, and you've probably seen this with clients in the Mulligainz Method as well, when they lose the weight or when you lost the weight, did your mental health improve? Or did you still have to shift your mindset towards focusing on those positive things that are happening day to day? Or was there an increase in overall happiness from just getting into better shape? I'm just curious from a personal perspective what happened to you.
I think it's difficult. To a certain extent, did I feel more confident in myself? Yes, but I don't think it was actually the weight loss. And I think that's where personal trainers get lost, and a lot of online coaches get lost in like promoting their programs for this is going to make you happy, this will make you so much more confident. I think it's actually the thing of doing something difficult. Like going to the gym is difficult, putting yourself out of your comfort zone, challenging yourself, as I'm speaking about, like, and that again, that small challenge might be even picking up the phone to ring the gym. These things make you feel better, and then as you're feeling better, you will eat slightly better. So because you want, and again, I got to a point even with my weight loss journey, I was 130 kilos, where I was feeling so shit about myself, and everyone was talking down to me, and all the lads in school who was bullying me for it. It's like I didn't even like myself, so why would I take care of myself? Why would I care what food I was putting in? It actually only ever made me hide what food I was eating, because I remember my mum used to buy tubs of ice cream, and like I'd eat the whole tub, I'd eat 2 or 3 of them, but I'd hide them. I'd be like, where are the tubs of ice cream gone? She knew well where they were gone, she just didn't want to say it to me, because again, she was super supportive. But it was that thing of like, I started to hide it because I was so ashamed of it. But I think I'm after forgetting your question.
Oh, I was asking about when you lost the weight, did mental health improve, or the confidence?
Yes, yeah. So like I think it was more so the thing of challenging myself to help me improve my mental health overall, and then from improving my happiness, from challenging myself, it helped me lose more weight and keep it off. I think the biggest struggle with weight loss actually isn't losing it. A lot of people here can lose weight, so doing plenty of negative behaviours to lose weight, and you can do some positive ones as well. It's actually being able to maintain and find a way that has, and absolutely working on my mental health to help me maintain my weight loss and not really struggle with my weight, being able to go out and enjoy time with my family and not worry about what clothes I'm putting on. For example, even the ice baths that they had around here yesterday, I took my top off and got straight in, and it's just that from constantly challenging myself, getting in that ice bath, taking my t-shirt off in front of a load of people isn't that challenging. When someone last week was trying to strangle me in a jiu-jitsu competition, I don't really care. Like, so it's that thing of just slowly challenging yourself, and then the happiness comes. And I don't think you ever achieve full happiness, chasing happiness as well. Some guy, Peter Crone, actually should try get my podcast.
Paul Peter's great. I follow his Instagram.
He's a genius. Yeah. He said the pursuit of happiness is the absence of happiness. And it's like when you're constantly chasing it, you're never going to be happy. And so I always try to relate back to that as well, as like selling a program saying that this is going to make you happy, likely probably isn't. Yeah,
it's such a good point there. And one of the things I've always subscribed to, I say always in more recent years, is choosing your suffering. Like I run, and I'm very vocal as someone who runs ultra marathons and 100-mile ultra marathons. I hate running. Like I don't enjoy it at all. But it's something that, because it's very difficult for me, very humbling, I find lifting weights, CrossFit, I find things like that I'm built for that. Like I'm built for those short bursts. I'm not built to run 100 miles. I find it so ridiculously difficult. Running marathons, so difficult. But it's that suffering that makes you feel mentally stronger. It makes you feel more confident, and seeking out those challenges. And you don't have to run 100 miles or even run a marathon for that. That might be, I think I heard you say it yesterday, making sure you're going to drink your 2 liters of water every day, or you're going to set your alarm for half an hour earlier, or you're going to get up and do a 20-minute HIIT session before the kids wake up. Like, it's all relative in terms of the challenges you set for yourself. But it's one of the quotes that my neighbour used to always give me when I was younger, that if you do what's easy, your life will be hard, and if you do what's hard, your life will be easy. And that's where that all comes back to. You mentioned the negative behaviours there about your weight loss, or about people's weight loss. What are some of those negative behaviours that you participated in on your journey that you see most often with people now?
I had a point there when you were speaking as well, and it's just something that I think it kind of relates to that, is I always put myself below everyone else, and there's always a position where I could never achieve something. And actually sitting down on the couch here with you, not to put you down or anything, you're a normal person. And same as
100%. I don't claim otherwise.
And so like every person I've ever met is like anyone that I'd be like, this guy is famous, or this guy is cool, or they're just normal people. And so when I was in that position, I was seeing people exercising, or I was seeing people lifting weights, or bench pressing, or running, or the 100 milers. It was always like, I could never do that, or I'm not able to do that because this person is so much better than me, or this person is on another level. but we're all just normal. We're just like, I can do absolutely anything. I can do what you're doing. Like if I wanted to run 100 miles, not that I could do it tomorrow.
But you could do it if you set the goal. Yeah, the timeline is the important thing, not the goal.
Exactly. And so that aspect of things is so funny because like I try and make myself as normal as possible. And it's so funny, I'd always speak to my therapist about this side of things. It's like, I get out of bed at 10 a.m. sometimes. I don't get up at like 5:30 in the morning like most influencers might have you believe. And it's like, that's normal. Like I'm just normal. I'm not any different. I'm not any worse than someone that gets up. It just suits me and I'm like, I enjoy that. So that aspect. And for some people, getting up earlier might be a little bit better for them. Or laziness, for example. I think everyone's like, oh, I'm really lazy because they're comparing themselves to other people. And comparison is a thief of joy is one of my favorite quotes. And so what I always say to people is like, my therapist actually said this to me and it's hilarious and I always keep it on. It's like, I was telling him I'm sick of being lazy and always procrastinating. It's like, laziness is actually just being very good at resting. So you're not lazy. That's a great reframe. It's like you're not lazy, you're actually just very good at resting. And sometimes when we're trying to rest or when we're being a little bit lazy, maybe our body needs to rest. And if we're beating ourselves up over resting, what's going to happen is we're not resting. So I might have a massive assignment to do or a massive amount of client work to do, whatever, and I'll be sat there and I'll be scrolling my phone. I'm like, I need to do that. I'm not really resting then. But meanwhile, if it's like, okay, I'm going to take 20 minutes, I'm not going to worry about that, and then I'm going to allow myself to rest because maybe my body needs it, and then I'll go into my work after. It's much better. So I think my negative behavior was putting myself that I could never achieve anything, that I wasn't able to do this, or I'm not able to sit down and talk to someone, or I'm not able to get on a stage and speak. And for people that might be, I'm not able to go to the gym because I was overweight or because I am overweight. You absolutely are. You belong there as much as everyone else. And that can be applied to anything, just not even just weight loss, with business or whatever it is you're trying to do, posting videos on Instagram. Everyone started somewhere. Like when I put up my first video, I was only talking to you about before, I had like a Amazon thing I hung up and it was pure crinkly and it looked so bad, but I'm only seeing that now and I'm looking back and it's so funny because I'd have put myself in a position where it's never going to work out for me, and it has.
Yeah, with the laziness, it's really funny. I don't know if I did it on this podcast. I think it was when I was on Being Coomer's podcast about the 7 types of laziness, that there's just the story we tell ourselves that, I'm lazy. But it's like, you're not lazy, because I've literally had mums tell me, oh, I'm so lazy when it comes to prepping food. I'm like, you have 4 kids. You are not lazy. Yeah. Like, you just don't prioritize prepping meals at the minute. Yeah. And that straight away, like I call it using anchors in other areas of your life to change the narrative of the story. It's what I talk about in books. That if you're somebody that's able to get 4 kids ready for school, you're actually really good with time management. You just don't do it with your training and you don't do it with your nutrition, but you can take that potential confidence. So the example I use, first time you ever kissed a guy or a girl, is depending on where you come from in terms of confidence. Like, do you remember the first ever kiss of a guy or a girl?
I just got a flashback.
Yeah, and everyone in the room.
I'm glad no one else can see the flashbacks in my head.
Yeah. I remember mine. Like I was 10. I was on holidays in Kerry. I was in a hotel room with this girl who was a year older. It sounds way more sketchy than it is. And I was shitting a brick. Like I remember sitting on the side of the bed. I was like, she's kissed someone before. I've never done this. And I was shitting a brick. And then what happened after? Like that happens to nearly every goal that you're afraid of. I did it, came downstairs, and there was a group of lads, because they're like another load of other 10, 11-year-old lads. And I was like, what was the big deal? Yeah. I was like, and now you take it for granted. I kiss my other half nearly every day that I see her, and you just take it for granted. And most things you're afraid of are a bit like that. So you need to kind of go towards them. But I call them fear anchors. It's where you're using a time in the past when you felt afraid to help you deal with the fear that you're currently going through. Like that might have been a driving test, that might have been an exam, but the same as you on stage yesterday, you had done other things in your life that you were afraid of. And now the stage and speaking at Elevate is one of those things which will help you at, IFS and all future speaking. So you're thinking about these times in the past. I'm like, if you can't think of one, I'm like, think about when you first kissed somebody. Like, because everybody has that experience. Hopefully everybody has that experience in some capacity. So like, they're really important mindset shifts when it comes to even things like weight loss, because people are afraid. Like we talked before when we went on air about some people are afraid to even get started. We were talking about it in the context of content creation, but I think it's the same with weight loss journey. People are afraid to actually get started with it. From the hundreds of people you've worked with over the last few months, what is the biggest barrier that you see in regards to people going from 0 to 1 and getting started? Is it the information? Is it a bombardment of information? Is it not finding the right person? Is it a story? What's been some of the common trend or the biggest common trend that you've seen with the people that you've worked with and helped over the years? Yeah,
stories is a massive one. I think actually when you realise that a lot of what goes on inside our head of telling us that certain things are going to happen, they're actually just stories, that they're not a determined outcome. And you're often imagining the worst story that's going to come to mind. with the speaking thing yesterday, it was like the worst thing possible is going to happen is I'm going to stand on stage and I'm not going to be able to speak. I'm going to freeze. And if that happens, I'll figure it out. Like I'll work on it. But these stories in our head, what we allow happen is we don't allow ourselves to pursue something at the fear of something that's most likely not going to happen. Because the thing that's most likely not going to happen is actually the worst outcome. Majority of the time it doesn't. So if you think of that worst outcome, and then we have like 100 other different ways that we can go. So I froze for a few times yesterday. I didn't freeze the whole entire talk. And that was never an imagined story in my head that's the way things could go. And again, it all worked out. So the stories in people's head that they tell themselves is like, for example, someone who's going through menopause, or someone who has PCOS, or someone who is really struggling with the weight. They have a belief that they can't lose it, or they're not able to lose it. And when you give yourself this label of like these things that hold you back, for example, depression and anxiety, and again, they're really real things. But if I went to the doctors last September, they would have told me I had depression and anxiety. It would have found it a lot more difficult to come out of where I was if I was diagnosed with these things. And so when we give ourselves a label of I am overweight, I am fat, it's almost limiting your belief in yourself and limiting everything that you can do. So what I highly recommend everyone do is remove that. You're a normal human being, you're normal. It's okay. And what we want to do from there is build on that and make the small steps. But for the majority of clients, it would kind of be stuff like that, and then high expectations of themselves. So a lot of people have such high expectations, whether it be from social media or just on themselves. I think everyone kind of just has.
Is that from the comparison of what they think they should be achieving?
Yeah. And so like if they're getting out on a walk, it's not good enough, and then they give up because they're not good enough. Or if they overeat one time, it's like, oh, I shouldn't overeat, or I have gone over my calories, and it becomes a catastrophe, and then they give up altogether. And that's the biggest thing. If I could remove that from people and be like, you're a normal human being. People like chocolate. You overate on chocolate today. It's fucking normal. It's okay. Move on with it. We'll get on. We'll figure it out. We'll get on to the next step. And it's that, because I think that holds people back. People are okay with starting. People are okay with getting their first day out on a walk and getting their second. It's like after that, if they miss the third day, it's like, oh, I've ruined all this. Or if they stick within their calorie deficit or calorie surplus, depending on what they want, after a period of time, if they come out of that or they've ruined it, when it's generally, oh, I give up. I don't think it's necessarily the first day that's difficult. It's keeping up after that. And that is because they're catastrophizing the whole thing and having higher expectations of themselves than what they should. Because again, we're not robots. Humans aren't robots. I'm not going to get everything perfect. I'm going to mess up my words here speaking. I'm going to lose train of thought with my questions on you because I'm a human being. And that's exactly it. If we all just see ourselves as that, we'll get on a lot better, I think. And I think that that's the main thing that people struggle with it, the first part. Yeah,
that's great advice, and something that it's in the book actually that you all have, Keen Edge, is not pressing the fuck it button, I call it. Yeah. It's when you've gone off plan for a meal, and this has happened to everybody at some stage if they're dieting, where you'll have a bowl of ice cream, or you'll have a chocolate bar, you'll have some biscuits, and you'll go, oh fuck it, I've gone off plan now, press the fuck it button, and I'll start back on Monday is normally the phrase. It normally happens on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then they roll into the weekend. Like, it's the analogy I use is it's like driving down the motorway, getting one flat tire, and then getting out and slashing the other three tires because one went flat. Like, that's the dietary equivalent of pressing the fuck it button.
A more vulgar one. I use the toilet seat. You pee in the toilet seat a little bit, and you just pee all over the place. So instead of just trying to pee back into the toilet bowl, you just pee all over the place. No one does that, right? We all just try to get it on target, but it's the same. It's the same thing. Just my way of explaining things.
I love that. That's 100%.
You can't say you haven't peed in the toilet.
I can also say I haven't destroyed a room after. So I'm with you 100% there. With that, then, because you've obviously done so much work on yourself and also learning from clients, because I think the best way to obviously help yourself in personal and professional development is to having conversations with people, either things like this or with clients. What's something that you know now as a coach that helps you support those people that you wish you knew when you started first? Now, you come from a more unique background than most. I was never 130 kilos, so I'll never have that context of what it's like to move around at that kind of weight. Okay. But so you have a unique perspective coming into this. But from a coaching side, for those who are listening in the room, for those listening on the podcast, what's something that you know now that when you started coaching people a few years ago, you wish you knew then? So, for example, one of the mistakes I made was I assumed when I qualified as a personal trainer first 11, 12 years ago, that what worked for me worked for everybody. So I was a big fan of carb cycling, so I put everybody on carb cycling. I was a big fan of resistance, time under tension with finishers, so I did that with all my clients at the time. And now it's more, square pegs and square holes. Some people like to CrossFit, some people like to hit a step count, some people like to carb cycle, some people are vegan, some people like keto. There's a million different variables, and it's about, right, what's going to work for you, square peg into a square hole. Yeah. What's something for you as a coach that you've changed your mind about, or something that you wish you knew when you started first that you apply with clients currently?
Listening is one, definitely, and it's kind of similar to what you were kind of saying there, listening to what the client wants or the person wants, rather than going from textbook straight to this is what you do, this is how you do it, this is the best way to do things. Because I think listening is a thing. I've always been quite good at listening, but I think listening on another level of like really listening and asking questions deeper into the issues rather than just surface level, okay, you're overweight and here, this is what we'll do to lose it or whatever, and actually listen to the issues behind it, I think is one thing that I've gotten better with over time, and something that has helped me understand their problems, understand what's actually going on, rather than like just hearing it and be like, okay, right, this is what we're going to do to solve this. Because I think when you really hear someone or really listen to someone, and put myself on the same level as clients is something that I've really done recently as well, because as coaches, it can be beneficial to be like, okay, this is my coach, this is my person. But I actually find it better to be like here, where I'm just a little bit above, where I'm just like, okay, I can provide you the information that you need, but you can still have input here. And I'll be like, okay, we're going to put on 3 sessions this week. How do you feel about that? Is 3 sessions okay for you this week? Or how is your calorie deficit feeling? Are you feeling hungry? And they might be like, oh, I'm not feeling hungry. And so I'd say, okay, we have 2 options here. We can reduce your calories, or we can do this. You make the decision. I'm going to tell you the pros and the cons of this. You make those decisions. Because I always lead my way. My coaching is I want to get every single person that comes my way to come to me and then fuck off and never need me again. Yeah. Really bad for business, but really what I enjoy doing. And most coaches will kind of have that aim. And my thing with that is like they have to be able to make decisions by themselves. And so I provide them as much information around it, both positives and negatives of everything as I can. And then they can make those decisions. But also one significant story that stand out to me with one of the clients, and I actually spoke about it in a talk yesterday. It was a really, really learning moment for me surrounding the social aspect of food and how much that can actually impact your mental health, and people don't see that. Is like one of my clients back a few years ago had a party, I think it was a birthday party or one of the birthday parties of one of the family members and thing. And she was like, oh, I really want to stick to my calorie deficit, I really want to lose weight. And there was a piece there and she was like, I'm going to seclude myself from that. And she removed herself from that situation, just went to her bedroom, whatever. And her father didn't make it to her next birthday, and they were all sitting down having pizza. And what that made me realize is like how much fun and how much of a social interaction there is surrounding these things with food, and it's not just calories in the food, and that how important that I should have actually just pushed her like, go fucking enjoy yourself. Even if it's not you have the whole pizza, eat until you feel full and then that's fine, or incorporate it, or maybe just don't worry about it today and we'll get back on. And so I'm a lot more pushy on that side of things with clients, because I have the perspective of I've seen this happen and I know it might be something that you'll regret. Because some people actually, even away on holidays, might remove themselves from certain situations because I don't want to go too overboard, or I don't want to go mad, which again is good in certain situations. But then if I provide both perspectives of like, okay, you have an opportunity here to actually go and maybe make healthier decisions or not go at all, and the cons of not going at all are all this, so I'd highly recommend just going with that. And that's another thing that I've definitely come to learn from coaching, and as you said, learning from clients. One of the best things I've ever done. These client stories are something that massively click in my head. And even the weight loss thing, like the coaching that I run, the Mulligainz Method, is like put out there as a weight loss program, and I'm really starting to switch that because there's a lot more to it. And the reason this is happening, again, one of my clients that I worked with for a period of like 3 years passed away, and I went to her funeral and not one single person mentioned her weight, not one single person mentioned anything got to do with her body shape or anything. I'm like, there's so much fucking more to this than just weight loss and what I've helped her do and her confidence and stuff. And they're the things that people are noticing, like, Mary was always so nice and she was always dancing around the place and not really caring what anyone was. Like, that's what I want my program to do. I don't want my program just to be numbers down on a scale, or I don't want any of that side of things. So learning from clients is like, you put the nail on the head, being better at listening and learning from clients that I've had.
That's great. That's one of those things that's a real mic drop moment when it comes to with weight loss and with mental health. One of the reasons that I think I'm able, and it sounds like you're exactly the same, that you're able to connect so deeply with people who are struggling with their weight, is because mental health is very similar to that. And the problem with weight loss and the problem with mental health is when you're struggling and you're going through it, you think you're the only one, and you're in this bubble, and you don't take that perspective that actually when you're gone, people aren't going to look back and go, wow, she's, you know what, I wish Oisin was 5 kilos lighter. Yeah. Like, people don't do that. No. They never do that. And we get, what's what I call in Rewire Your Mindset, the junk values. And I had them for years. My daughter actually shifted me out of this a lot because I was competing in bodybuilding shows at the time. And I was brain dead. I was walking around calorically restricted, and I was like a zombie. Like, I literally couldn't form thoughts in my head. I was so tired all the time. And I remember thinking, I'm going to be a shit dad. Yeah. Like, I was like, I can't even form a thought. How am I going to do this? Yeah. And then a few months after she was born, I did my last show, and then that was it. And it was kind of a shift from junk values. What I had on my appearance, and my entire world was getting bigger, getting leaner, making sure I looked a certain way. And when I realized then actually that doesn't matter. She doesn't give a shit. Yeah. She doesn't care. She doesn't care if I'm 100 kilos overweight or if I'm walking around like should be on the front of a magazine. She doesn't care. No. And sometimes pulling yourself out of that, your loved ones don't care how you look.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying don't get in shape. I'm a big proponent of moving and eating well, and both of our businesses are built on that, for health and for confidence reasons, and your life quality will be better. But ultimately, it can't come at the cost of other things. A quote that I love, and I can't remember who it's by, is, don't forget the flowers at your feet when you're reaching for the moon. And if you're reaching for a big goal, you have all these incredible things in your life, family members, friends, things that you love to do, that it's so easy to not focus on those things when you're trying to hit this goal. But ultimately, they don't really care.
Yeah.
And again, I was fortunate. I had that perspective and life shift from a different area. It sounds like you've had it even earlier than me, which is amazing. I didn't have it at 25, so I'm so glad to hear that. And it's really important for people that are working with you, and it sounds like you bring this awareness to them, that yes, get healthier, move more, eat well, fuel your body, all these things, enjoy your food, enjoy the social, but don't forget all these incredible things, because when you're dead and gone, people aren't going to say, fuck, I wish they were lighter, or I wish they were bigger. They're not. They're going to think about the times you had with them. They're going to think about how great you are as a person, your personality, how you made them laugh, all of these things. Where does your personal development come from? And the reason I ask this is I see a lot of similarities in us in terms of our story. We don't even live that far apart in terms of location. You're not even that far away.
You're not getting away from me now.
Yeah, exactly. We're fucked now. Like Oisin coming around for tea every day. But that's, I see a lot of it. And at 25, I was a bit more in a bubble. I was working as a teacher. I was very focused on my physical appearance. That was kind of where I was at in that stage of life. You've clearly pulled yourself out of that. Therapy is a big one. Therapy is one of those things that if I could go back to give advice to my 25-year-old self, I'm like, go to therapy, sort your shit out. Like, because I had a lot of shit, a lot of fucking baggage that wouldn't fit on a fucking plane to the States that I just didn't unpack until I got a little bit older. What has helped you? Is it constant? Is it the therapy alone? Is it books? Is it listening to podcasts? Is it surrounding yourself with better people? How is it that you're able to get your mindset and your thinking to where it is currently, that you're actually able to give back to people like that are listening to this podcast or clients? What is your kind of own style, or where does that come from for you?
Yeah, really hard question. My mom's a therapist, I suppose, so like I don't escape therapy. It's like I go home. Actually, I'd often have conversations with her. It's like I come home and I'd be upset or I'd be really frustrated, and she'd go into the therapy behind. I was like, just stop being a therapist for right now. Just let me be sad. Like, can I cry for a minute? So I think that I've always been quite emotional and sensitive as well. So like the whole way through school, like instead of fighting anyone or fighting back or stand up for myself, I'd always be crying. I'd always be quite upset, and I'd always be quite quiet as well. Like I wouldn't be someone that would ever speak out or anything like that. So I think I've had a lot of internal dialogue a lot of the time, and I think that's maybe helped me develop. But 100% therapy and having my mom there speaking to me all the time, like and I'd say this all the time, and I've had her on my podcast. I don't care what she says after this. She is one of the best therapists in Ireland. She does play therapy with kids, and play therapy is a massive thing that's only coming through now, and it's something that massively helped me, because I was in a position where I couldn't really speak. I couldn't speak out, but I had a lot of internal dialogue, and it was very difficult for me to sit across from someone and speak. And so what I did, and I find this embarrassing, I don't know why, it's like I put things in a sand tray, like toys, and developed like a story, and the therapist would ask me questions about this, but it made it easier for him to ask questions about this sand tray in front of me than ask me questions personally. It was easier for me to answer to the sand tray and him get answers off the sand tray as to what was going on in my life, and that reflected, and that made things so much easier for me, because he got the internal dialogue that was going on out, and then him and being able to refer it back to me. But therapy has been massive, and I recommend, as you said, absolutely everybody go, whether you're feeling really good, whether you're not feeling great, and you don't need absolutely anything wrong with you to go. I go and I'm happy, I go and I'm laughing all the time. But for sure, therapy. I actually just wanted to touch on the values things, because I know you were touching on it there as well, and I just had a thought in my head, is like, even as an online influencer, or like people with social media following, you can attach your values to the following. It's something I've always had to go back on the last couple of months, is like, all right, Oisin, what's going on here? What happens if your 500,000 followers and you wake up in the morning time are gone? Like, if they're all gone, what are you going to do? Who are you? And that's something I've really started to develop, is like become a better person outside of that, and like spend more time with my family, or not get too caught up in the business, or that I'm bigger than everyone else. And that's something that I'm always so aware of, is that like I'm just still normal. And like for a lot of coaches online, they attach a lot of their values to their body, and this is where it actually becomes a negative thing, and that starts to pass off to their clients. And it's something that I'd say to a lot of coaches, is like, fact, you need to remove some of like, you are just your body shape and it's so important to you and it's so integral to your business and everything like that. I don't really post topless photos to my Instagram. I don't really put any emphasis on my body or any of that side of things. It's all just like, you might see from it, it's just videos of me, that's it. Like, and even client transformation photos, I don't share any of those. I don't think it's useful for me. And in my opinion, again, everyone has different opinions, is like, this is a before and this is an after picture. And if someone that looks like this before picture is seeing this as a before picture and someone's looking better, it's like, I am bad because I look like that before picture. I'm not good enough. And that pushes them further away from fitness. So although these before and after pictures could make me an absolute shit ton of money, I refuse to do that because it's not something I stand by, and it's something that I think can be quite negative. And again, it can motivate some people, but in my opinion, it's not something that I do the whole time. But that was just another value. Sorry to sidetrack completely.
No, it's what I mentioned earlier. Those before and after pictures I have a love-hate relationship with too, because they can inspire somebody like crazy, or they can make them feel really bad. And it's nearly where you're at in that given day that's going to determine that. It's really interesting there as well, you know, as you mentioned with your mum being a therapist and being able to check in with that internally. It sounds like one of the things that helped me a lot was understanding that little bit of dissociation and being able to remove yourself and see, I call it the 35,000 airplane view, like just pull yourself out of your body and be like, okay, you know, I can merge that with what I call my 97-year-old rule. I'm like, what would I regret most on my 97-year-old deathbed? And that helps me a lot with decision making, whether it's business, whether it's life, whether it's anything I'm doing, people I'm around, relationships I'm in, romantic or otherwise, friendships, all of that is what would I regret. And that can help you get clear on those values, because if you're doing that with, right, it's not Brian making the decision, it's not Oisin, it's not Sarah, it's not Jane, it's not Ginny, it's I'm up here, what's the best thing I should do and what would I regret more on my deathbed? Like those things can just give you a little bit of clarity. Yeah. And that pulls me back, because you mentioned there about the therapy and the little bit of dissociation with the projection onto the toys and the therapist being able to interpret that. Bullying is something that I still struggle with this to this day. Like I fucking hate bullies. Yeah. Like, you know, Holly was getting bullied in play school. I remember when she was about 4 and she was like, what do I, you know, she was crying and upset. I was like, if a kid's hitting you, I was like, hit them back. Yeah. I was like, hit them back. I was like, you don't take that. I was like, you don't go after them. You don't become the bully, but you stand up for yourself. So I still have a disproportionate emotional reaction to situations like that I'm very aware of. Something that I struggled with later in life that I didn't start to realize until I was in my 30s was taking that bullied scenario and becoming your own bully. And my internal dialogue, and this is so weird because it's so counterintuitive, because you have a lot of external success driven by internal turmoil, because you have this internal bully who's always fucking beating you up. Like that's why I got up at 5 a.m. That's why I would work out for multiple hours. That's why I was able to build successful businesses, because I felt like I wasn't good enough if I didn't, because that bully was constantly in my fucking head. How did you go, and this might have been a different scenario for you, because I found that people who have been bullied tend to remove that from some area of their life, whether that was a parent bullying them or friends or a childhood experience, and then they become their own fucking bully in their head, which is way worse. It's way harder to get that fucker out than somebody who's in your actual physical environment. Did anything like that happen to you? And again, I don't want to put words in your mouth because you might have had a completely different experience, but definitely clients who you struggle with, where they're their own biggest enemy living between their 2 ears. They've got their own internal bully that they're dealing with. How do you cope with that, either personally or for clients who are struggling with that, where they're literally their own biggest enemy? The environment's not helping to some degree, but they're constantly beating themselves up, saying, I'm not good enough, I need to do more. Like you said earlier, 5 minutes isn't enough, I need to do more. What kind of conversation do you open up with people who have that, or what's something that you've used from your own life? Yeah, I think with clients, I always kind of try relate it to myself, because sometimes the stories become more relatable when they're real. Mm-hmm. And so like when I was bullied when I was really, really young, the same as your daughter there, is like my mom would always tell me not to hit anyone, not do anything. So I'd always be the person that wouldn't stand up for myself. But it's also because I wasn't confident, and so I wouldn't in that case. But what I came to realize recently with jiu-jitsu, my jiu-jitsu coach is an absolute mind master. Some of the stuff he says, I'm like, you should be doing talks here, not me. And he said to me, choose peace. So if you're forced into peace, so for example, your daughter, if she's in school and someone's bullying her and she's not confident enough to stand up for herself, that's not being peaceful. That's not being a solver as such. What's happening there is that she's not confident, and internal conflict starts. So she goes home and she beats herself up over it. So that's not peaceful. Like, even though that's saving conflict, it's not peaceful. If you're in a position where you're confident enough to stand up for yourself and then you decide not to, that's okay. And if you're in a position where you can stand up for yourself and she can
fight off this person or self-defense, whatever it is, then that's choosing peace. In that situation, peace can be completely different, because then she's going home with no internal dialogue. So what I used to do, I'd be get bullied. I remember at my leaving cert results night, I got kicked down the stairs in one of the nightclubs and got my face bet in, and I did nothing, and I hit the guy back, nothing, went straight back home, and I cried for ages after that. And I was like, I didn't stand up for myself, and I bet myself so much over that. Meanwhile, if I had actually stood up for myself, even though it might be a negative thing, stand up for yourself in that way of fighting someone off, that would have been a better option of choosing peace rather than be forced into, because I wasn't peaceful then. That was me being forced into for not being confident. So I was kind of relate that story regards to people struggling with the bullying aspect, or the bully between their heads. But also there can be positives to it. So I suppose reframing everything is super important. So the bully inside my head makes me more normal, makes me more able to listen to you, because I'm not ahead of you then, Brian. I'm not like on this level here where I can actually listen to what you've learned. And like sometimes being the lesser person in the room, you learn a lot more. And so by being quiet and people speaking to me, I learn different aspects about business, like what we were talking about, like, holy shit, I've none of this stuff done. You're talking about a system. I was like, I don't even have one of those. You're like, you're crazy. But if I was in a position where I was like, not the internal dialogue, and I didn't have this dialogue where I'm a little bit like, okay, I'm just going to listen to what this guy says because he's established or whatever, and I was so much ahead of you, I wouldn't learn these things. Yeah. And so I think there is the aspect of that. But I think it's something I'm still struggling with. So the bully aspect on my Instagram, I'd often get comments of people making fun of me or taking the piss out of me. And I'm aware that the old Oisin reignites of who has been bullied before, and I'll clap back at them. I'm like, I'm not taking that. Yeah. And I do it to stand up for people, because I'm like, this person is making comments to this person in my comment section. I'm going to stand up and I'm like, shut up. Like, you don't know what you're talking about or something. And that drains energy out of me. I am becoming more aware of it, but I'm definitely learning from, okay, maybe it's best to pull back from these side of things, because that bully hater inside of me is still there. And again, I think we all work in different aspects, and maybe that might not be the most positive side of me. Like, but I've had mad comments on my Instagram. I had someone threaten to come to my house and kill me and my whole family over an Instagram video that I made on McDonald's. I ate McDonald's for 2 weeks and lost weight doing it to prove to people that you can eat whatever you want and lose weight at the same time. Yeah. And that was one of my first viral videos. But I got a message off that, like, you're promoting negative health and you're going to impact my whole family with this, so I'm going to kill you. And like, to a certain extent, you're like, okay, that's probably not going to happen. But then to a certain extent, what am I going to do if this guy shows up? Like, what the hell is going to go on? So it's crazy. And I think that bully aspect still gets me, it drains me a little bit, but I'll get better at it, I suppose. And I'll take advice off you.
yeah, it's such an interesting one. The social media is such a catch-22. You said that, like, you get that aspect, but you can also serve 500,000 people and cut through a lot of the noise and that bullshit that's online that's confusing people, and they don't actually know what to do. So it's definitely a catch-22. With that, and it's the final question before we wrap up, and then we get people to add to that following on social and check out the podcast with your mum. But what advice would you give your 18-year-old self if you could go back? Because I know these are both times in our lives, 17, 18, 17 particularly for me, 16, 17, when I was struggling the most. And you mentioned there about old Oisin. And Gabby Bernstein, who's multiple times New York Times bestselling author, has been on this podcast, and she spoke about, don't let your teenage self run your business. And I have to remind myself of that when it comes to relationships with my partner and my other half. I'm like, I can't let the 16-year-old Brian run my relationship, because that's fears. There are things that are ingrained in us that sometimes we make decisions based on a past self. But for those who are struggling now, or just for yourself, based on your journey over the past few years, what advice would you offer your 18-year-old self? Not necessarily directly, because you wouldn't change your course, because your story is where it is because of what's happened. But for someone who's listening, because sometimes there can be genius and simplicity when it comes to, well, actually, I would have done this differently, or I would have said, do this. I would always say, work on yourself. I probably would have said, go to therapy. Like, it would have been just a small tidbit that would have helped me a lot. I don't know what I had listened, but it's the advice I would have given. What would you do?
I'd hand him a picture of me sat on a couch in a room full of people here. I'm like, all these times you're telling yourself you couldn't. And actually relating back to that bullying thing, is another thing that I've done is start to name that person in my head, and I tell him to fuck off. I'm like, this other guy he's Sam in my brain, so this is Sam speaking to me. I was like, fuck off, Sam. So I just hand him a picture of what's going on. Like, I don't know, I'll be fine. The word Mom said to me was like, just keep going, you'll be fine. Like, sometimes people can feel like that they have to have a direction. Like at 18, I would have been felt like, I don't know what I'm doing, or if I'm doing this right, or with the sports science course I switched last minute. Is that you'll figure it out, you'll be fine. That's it. That sentence, you'll figure it out, you'll be fine. With everything in life, no matter what happens, shit hits the fan. I put up a video and I get 0 views on Instagram. You'll figure it out, it'll be fine. No one sees the video anyways, so it's not that embarrassing if we get 0 views. Everyone's always afraid, like, what happens if no one sees it, so it doesn't matter. But
it's true, so simple.
But it's just that I'll figure it out and I'll be fine. 100%, that'd be it.
Yeah, I just want to wrap on that too, about naming that bully. That's something I've done as well, which is very powerful because it removes it from you then, and it feels like it's somebody else. The same way as if somebody in your life was, you know, shouting shit at you, you like, fuck off.
Yeah.
Like, you know, get out of the room, or you'd leave the room. Sometimes that negative voice in your head, when you name it as an external thing, is just enough of a removal or a dissociation that allows you to be like, oh, actually, this is the bad version of me speaking. I'm not going to listen to that today. And that can help.
And it seems so stupid. Like, these things seem so silly. It's so funny. Because, like, back at 18, if someone told me to do that, I'd be like, you're actually crazy. Like, you don't know. It would have been like they whipped out tarot cards or something. If someone likes tarot cards here, I'm sorry. But, like, now it's like, geez, it does work once you start to do it. So, yeah, it's a funny one.
I love it. Oisin, a great conversation. There's so many things that we've touched on here. For those who are listening, not for everyone in the live room, because we're going to do a little bit of a Q&A after, but for those listening on the podcast, where's the best place, the Instagram handle to follow you? Obviously, the podcast you did with your mum, I know that's something you're growing as well. But for anyone that wants to reach out or follow you or check out your method, work with you potentially as a coach, where's the best place for people to go?
So Mulligainz Fitness on Instagram. So it's Mulligainz_fitness with a Z as well. I chose the most random name. It was so funny. It was a nickname the lads all gave to me when I started coaching, because they were like, oh, you're going in for the gains. And that was kind of ironic because I'm like so against that whole hyper side of bodybuilding stuff. So it's so funny. But yes, on that. And the podcast and all the links are on there. So you'll find them if you want them.
Amazing. And for everybody listening, I will link that on the show notes on briankeenfitness.com, and it'll be in the description for the podcast, wherever you're listening to your podcast. Oisin, thank you so much again.
Thanks a million, Brian. Thanks for having me on.
Boom.
There you have it, Oisin Mulligan on his extreme weight loss journey, building confidence after being fat shamed, and how to stop caring what people think about you, live from Elevate 2023. Such an enjoyable conversation, and I'm so glad we got to have it live in front of a great audience at the Elevate Festival. If you are listening to this podcast, if it's your first time listening, definitely hit that follow or subscribe for episodes coming every single week. If you are a long-term listener and you enjoyed today's podcast, please leave me a rating and a review. It helps massively when it comes to bringing on great guests, and I try and read as many as I can to get that feedback on what kind of episodes, topics that you like, so that I can bring more of those style experts onto the show. So that's everything from today's podcast, and that's the ask from me. Catch you all next Monday.